I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near dragons. I fixed broken cargo haulers, rusted mining rigs, and the occasional overheating atmospheric skimmer on the outer rim colony of Blackridge. My world was oil-stained gloves, cracked welding masks, and engines that screamed louder than common sense. Dragons, especially colossal ones, belonged to legends, distant mountain territories, and classified imperial reports. Not scrapyards, not mechanics like me. The first tremor hit just after dusk. At first, I thought it was another or hauler crash landing off trajectory. The ground shook hard enough to rattle tool racks and send a cascade of bolts clattering across my workbench. Then came the sound. Not metal, not machinery. A roar. Deep, ancient, bone-splitting. Every worker in the yard froze. Someone whispered, "That's not a ship." Then the second impact came, far heavier than the first. The horizon lit briefly in a flare of fire that painted the night sky crimson. Sirens from the colony perimeter began wailing almost immediately. Security drones lifted off in frantic swarms. I should have stayed in the shop. Instead, I grabbed my field kit. Call it stupidity, call it instinct, but I'd grown up around broken things, and when something crashed that hard, it usually needed fixing, or mercy. The wreck site was just beyond the abandoned quarry fields, where the colony's jurisdiction blurred into wild territory. I expected twisted alloy and burning fuel. I found scales. The first dragon lay partially embedded in a crater of shattered stone, wings torn and bleeding along the membrane edges. He was enormous, larger than any transport ship I'd ever serviced. His scales were deep obsidian streaked with ember-red fissures that pulsed faintly with heat. Smoke curled from between his teeth with every labored breath. The second dragon lay several hundred meters away, tangled in fractured quarry machinery. Her scales shimmered silver blue, cracked and scorched in places. One wing was bent at a sickening angle. Frost clung to the air around her despite the burning debris nearby. They weren't attacking. They were dying. Security drones circled overhead but kept their distance. No one wanted to be the first to approach two creatures capable of leveling cities. I did. Slowly. Hands visible. Tools hanging loose at my belt. The obsidian dragon's eye opened when I got within 20 meters. It was molten gold and fixed on me instantly. The ground heated under my boots. "I'm not armed," I said clearly, raising both hands. "And if you wanted me dead, I'd already be ash." His breath rumbled. Smoke thickened. I pointed toward the torn membrane of his wing. "That's going septic if it seals wrong. I can stabilize it." The silver-blue dragon's head shifted slightly at that. Her icy breath fogged the air. Unlike the male, her gaze wasn't threatening. It was calculating, measuring. A distant security loudspeaker crackled to life. "Civilians are ordered to evacuate the perimeter immediately." Neither dragon moved. I took another step forward. The obsidian dragon's claw twitched. The ground cracked slightly under its weight. "Your wing joint is misaligned," I continued, voice steady despite the fact my knees were trying to resign from existence. "If you try to fly like that, it'll tear completely." Silence. Then, slowly, deliberately, the massive dragon lowered his head. Not in submission. Not weakness. Permission. I exhaled carefully and moved closer. The heat radiating off him was intense, but manageable with the insulated gloves in my kit. Up close, I could see the damage clearly. Deep ballistic tears, likely from anti-air artillery. Not local tech. Military grade. "You weren't supposed to survive that," I muttered under my breath. The silver-blue dragon let out a low rumble, almost like agreement. I worked quickly. Industrial sealant foam adapted surprisingly well to scale fissures. Carbon thread cabling stabilized the membrane tears. I used hydraulic braces from my kit to realign the wing joint while the obsidian dragon endured the procedure without thrashing once. His jaw clenched. Heat flared, but he did not strike. "Almost done," I murmured. Across the crater field, I heard colony security vehicles approaching cautiously. They were preparing heavy artillery. "Bad timing," I muttered. I sprinted toward the silver-blue dragon next. Her wing fracture was worse, compound, exposed bone beneath crystalline scale. She studied me carefully as I approached. "If I set this wrong, you'll never glide again," I said honestly. Her massive eye narrowed slightly. Then she extended the injured wing toward me. "Trust." I swallowed hard and got to work. Reinforcement brackets from quarry rigs, thermal clamps to fuse fractured bone edges temporarily, coolant gel to prevent shock from her own internal frost energy. She hissed in pain once, but did not pull away. By the time security forces fully surrounded the quarry ridge, I was covered in soot, frost burns, and dragon blood. "Step away from the creatures," the commander shouted through amplified speakers. The obsidian dragon slowly lifted his head, newly stabilized wing flexing carefully. The silver-blue dragon rose beside him, injured but upright. Together, they towered over the armored vehicles. I stood between them and the artillery line. "They're leaving," I yelled back. "Stand down." No one fired. Not yet. The obsidian dragon looked down at me one last time. His golden eye burned, not with fury, but with something far more unsettling. Awareness. The silver-blue dragon stepped closer, lowering her head near mine. Her breath was cold enough to frost my collar. Then both colossal dragons spread their damaged but functioning wings. With a thunderous gust of wind and flame-tinged frost, they launched into the night sky. The security commander stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But as the twin silhouettes vanished beyond the clouds, I felt something strange settle into my chest. Not fear, not regret, promise. And deep in the distance, carried faintly on the wind, came a sound that was not a roar. It was a call. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the security interrogation, that part was expected. Colony officials cycled me through 3 different rooms, asked the same questions in slightly different tones, and tried very hard to understand why 2 colossal dragons hadn't incinerated me where I stood. "You approached them voluntarily?" the commander asked again. "Yes." "You made physical contact?" "Yes." "And they allowed it?" I didn't bother correcting him. Allowed wasn't the right word. It had been chosen. By dawn, they released me with a formal warning and a less formal label. Reckless civilian liability. I walked back to my workshop exhausted, hands still faintly smelling of scale burn and coolant gel. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. The sky darkened again just after midnight the following evening. At first, I assumed it was a storm front rolling in from the northern ridges. Then the shadows shifted wrong. Too massive, too deliberate. The ground trembled once, then twice. My workshop roof groaned as a colossal weight settled above it. Tools rattled violently off shelves. I grabbed the nearest wrench out of instinct, which was absurd considering what was currently standing on my building. A deep rumble vibrated through the walls. Not a roar, a signal. Slowly, very slowly, I stepped outside. The entire scrapyard was bathed in alternating red and silver light. The obsidian dragon perched atop the main crane tower, wings folded carefully to avoid crushing it. The silver-blue dragon stood behind the shop, her injured wing now bound with something far more refined than my makeshift braces. They had returned. Security sirens had not yet sounded. Somehow they had avoided detection. The obsidian dragon lowered his massive head until his golden eye aligned with mine. There was no aggression in it. No dominance display. Recognition. "You're pushing your luck?" I muttered quietly. The silver-blue dragon exhaled gently, and frost traced delicate patterns across the scrap metal around us, but stopped inches from my boots. Controlled. Precise. They hadn't come to threaten. They had come to repay. The obsidian dragon extended one enormous claw toward the open yard between us. The ground cracked, not violently but purposefully. Stone shifted aside in a clean, circular motion. Beneath it, something glowed faintly. I stepped closer despite every survival instinct screaming at me. Embedded in the earth was a crystalline object roughly the size of a human torso. It pulsed with alternating heat and cold, red veins intertwined with silver threads. Not technology. Not mineral. Alive. I looked up at them. "What is this?" The silver-blue dragon's mind touched mine before I realized what was happening. Not words. Images. Sky battles. artillery fire, betrayal, a hidden clutch, 2 eggs. Colossal dragons were not solitary creatures by nature. They bonded for life. They did not abandon territory unless forced. They had not crashed by accident. They had been hunted. The obsidian dragon leaned closer. His golden eye softened slightly as another wave of images pressed into my thoughts, this time clearer. A remote cavern beyond colony territory. A hidden nest shielded from scanners. A threat still searching the skies. And at the center of it all, the crystal before me split faintly along a seam. Not fully, just enough to reveal what lay inside. An egg, not one, 2, intertwined within the crystalline shell. Faint heartbeats pulsing in alternating rhythm. One ember red, one silver blue. My throat went dry. You want me to? I couldn't finish the sentence. The silver blue dragon lowered herself until her massive head nearly touched the ground before me. Not submission. Not weakness. Trust. The obsidian dragon's presence filled the yard like controlled wildfire. He could level this colony in minutes. Instead, he stood still, waiting. More images came. A future raid. The hunters returning. The colony caught in crossfire. The eggs destroyed if left hidden in predictable territory. They could not protect the clutch alone, not injured. Not while being tracked. But a mechanic? No one would suspect a mechanic. You're insane, I whispered. I fix engines. I don't raise war machines. The obsidian dragon released a low rumble that vibrated through my chest. Not anger. Amusement. Another image flooded my mind. Me standing between them and artillery. Me stabilizing torn wings instead of running. Choice. They weren't asking for obedience. They were offering partnership. The crystalline casing shifted again, the seam widening slightly. The dual heartbeats inside strengthened. The silver-blue dragon's mental presence brushed against mine one last time. Gentler now. Protect. Guide. Teach restraint. The same discipline I had shown them without even realizing it. Security sirens began wailing faintly in the far distance. Radar had finally noticed the sky displacement. Time was up. The obsidian dragon carefully nudged the crystalline egg forward with the tip of his claw. It stopped inches from my boots. Warm on one side, cool on the other, balanced. If I say no? I asked quietly. The silver-blue dragon met my gaze steadily. The images changed. The hunters finding the nest. Fire raining across the quarry fields. The colony burning as collateral damage. Then another image. The eggs safe. Hidden. Grown. 2 colossal dragons standing not as destroyers, but as guardians over Blackridge itself. My shop roof groaned again as the obsidian dragon spread his wings. No pressure. No threats. Just truth. The sirens grew louder. Armed drones would be overhead within seconds. I looked down at the pulsing crystal. 2 heartbeats. 2 futures. You couldn't have picked a farmer? I muttered under my breath. The silver-blue dragon's eye shimmered faintly in what I swear was humor. I grabbed my welding tarp and threw it over the crystal instinctively. Fine, I said. But if they start chewing on my engines, that's on you. The obsidian dragon let out a deep, satisfied rumble. Both colossal forms launched skyward just as security spotlights cut across the scrapyard. By the time drones scanned the area, the dragons were gone. All that remained was a slightly cracked stretch of earth, and 2 powerful, synchronized heartbeats pulsing beneath a tarp in a mechanic's yard. That was the night they shared their secret. And my life, quiet, grease-stained, predictable, ended forever. The crystal egg started humming 3 days later. Not cracking, not shaking, humming. I had dragged it into the back storage bay beneath layers of scrap plating and old reactor shells, masking its thermal signature with industrial insulation blankets. Officially, I was repairing a damaged fusion coupler for the northern grid. Unofficially, I was hiding the most dangerous secret on the planet under my welding table. The humming began as a vibration through the floor. At first I thought it was seismic activity. Blackridge had unstable fault lines beneath the quarry basin. But the rhythm was too steady, too intentional. Thump thump, thump thump. 2 heartbeats. Perfectly synchronized. I pulled the tarp back slowly. The crystalline shell had changed. The red and silver veins that once pulsed lazily were now brighter, branching like lightning beneath translucent glass. Tiny fractures spiderwebbed along the surface, not breaks, but stress lines. Growth. Easy, I muttered, kneeling beside it like it could understand. You're still early. The temperature in the room shifted instantly. Heat flared on my left side. Frost gathered on my right. I blinked. The egg wasn't just reacting. It was responding. I reached out carefully and placed my palm against the center seam where red and silver light intertwined. Warmth flooded through my hand, but it didn't burn. The cold that followed didn't freeze. It balanced. A pulse shot up my arm and into my chest. For half a second, I saw through unfamiliar senses. Darkness inside crystal. Curled forms. One restless, flickering like embers under ash. The other calm and coiled, like deep winter beneath ice. Awareness brushed mine. Curious. Hungry. Alive. I jerked my hand back, heart racing. Okay. I breathed. So we're doing psychic bonding now. Great. A sharp knock rattled the front workshop door. I nearly jumped out of my boots. Inspection. A voice barked from outside. Colony security. Random compliance check. Of course. The dragon's visit hadn't gone unnoticed. Even if security drones hadn't caught clear visuals, orbital sensors had recorded mass displacement. The colony council was nervous, and nervous officials meant searches. I threw the tarp back over the egg and kicked an old cargo crate in front of it just as another knock echoed. Coming, I called, forcing my voice steady. 3 officers stepped inside when I opened the door. 2 armed patrol guards and 1 intelligence officer in a dark coat with 2 clean boots. The kind who didn't crawl through scrapyards unless they expected to find something important. Evening, I said casually. Shop's a mess. Hazard pay if you trip. The intelligence officer's gaze swept the workshop slowly. We detected aerial anomalies in this sector 3 nights ago, she said. Large-scale life forms. You were present during the previous dragon incident. Hard to miss, I shrugged. They tend to block out the sun. One of the guards moved toward the back storage area. My pulse spiked. Behind him, beneath scrap and shielding, 2 unborn dragons hummed softly. Too softly for human ears, but not too softly for dragon senses. The guard paused mid-step. The air shifted again. A wrench slid off a shelf and clanged against the floor. Everyone looked at it. Magnetic interference, I told myself. Totally normal in a workshop. The guard took another step. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost crept along the metal wall behind him in thin, delicate lines. He froze. Sir, he muttered, staring at the spreading ice. You running cryo units back here? Coolant leak, I said immediately. Old pipes. Happens when pressure fluctuates. The intelligence officer narrowed her eyes. Then, heat flared from the opposite side of the room. Not enough to ignite anything, but enough to shimmer the air. The guard stumbled back, swearing. What kind of leak does that? He snapped. The humming beneath the tarp grew louder. Thump, 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 thump. Not frantic. Protective. I stepped forward deliberately, placing myself between them and the storage bay. Look, I said, lowering my voice. You're welcome to scan whatever you want, but you'll find nothing except broken machinery and unpaid invoices. Dragons don't hide in toolboxes. The intelligence officer studied me for a long moment. Then her wrist scanner beeped softly. No biomass readings above livestock threshold, she said quietly. Of course there weren't. The crystalline shell wasn't registering as organic. The dragons had thought of everything. She nodded once. Wrap up, she ordered the guards. They left without another word, though one kept glancing back at the frost patterns slowly melting from the wall. The moment the door shut, the humming softened. The temperature normalized. I exhaled slowly. You two, I muttered, walking back to the tarp, are going to give me heart failure before you're even born. I knelt and pulled the covering aside again. The crystal surface was glowing brighter now. The seam between red and silver had widened another fraction of an inch. Through the translucent shell, I could make out shapes more clearly. 2 hatchlings curled together. One darker, scales forming like polished stone with faint ember glow beneath. The other pale and luminous, her surface shimmering like frost under moonlight. They weren't separate eggs. They were sharing one shell, balanced, intertwined. A sudden, sharp crack echoed in the room. I flinched. A thin fracture split across the top of the crystal, this one deeper than the others. Inside, the ember-colored hatchling shifted violently. Impatient, the silver-blue one nudged back gently, steadying him. I felt it again, that mental brush against my thoughts. Not images this time. Emotion, confusion, hunger, instinct, and something else. Recognition. They knew me, not as parent, not yet, but as presence, as the one who had accepted them. "You're early," I whispered. "You're supposed to take weeks." Another crack formed. Heat flared stronger now, forcing me to shield my face briefly. Frost spiraled outward across the floor in symmetrical patterns. The crystal was destabilizing. They weren't going to wait weeks. They were going to hatch tonight. Outside, distant thunder rolled across the sky. I stepped toward the workshop entrance and looked up. 2 massive silhouettes circled high above the clouds. Watching, not landing, trusting me to handle this. I swallowed hard and returned to the egg just as a sharp, splintering crack split the seam fully open. A claw, small compared to their parents but still larger than my hand, punched through the crystal. It was black with faint glowing veins of red. A second claw followed moments later, sleek and silver blue, edges rimmed in frost. The shell shattered outward in a controlled burst of steam and shimmering shards. 2 hatchlings tumbled onto the workshop floor in a tangle of wings and tails. They were enormous compared to any creature I'd ever held, each the size of a large dog already, but fragile in their own way, scales still soft, wings damp and folded. The ember-scaled one lifted his head first, eyes blazing gold. The silver-blue one followed, eyes pale and luminous. They looked at each other. Then they looked at me. The ember hatchling opened his mouth. I braced for fire. Instead, a small puff of warm smoke drifted out and curled harmlessly toward the ceiling. The silver-blue hatchling sneezed, and a delicate flurry of snowflakes scattered across my boots. I stared at them. They stared back. Then, in perfect unison, both stumbled forward on unsteady legs and collapsed against me. Heat on one side, cold on the other, balanced, claiming. Outside, the 2 colossal dragons let out a low, distant rumble that echoed across Blackridge like rolling thunder. The bond had begun, and there was no turning back. Raising 2 dragon hatchlings in a scrapyard was not part of my 5-year plan. The first week alone nearly killed me. The ember-scaled one, who I started calling Blaze because it felt safer than walking furnace, had an appetite that could bankrupt a mining corporation. The silver-blue one, Frost, ate less often but required absurdly specific minerals and coolant-infused water to stabilize her internal frost core. If either of them went too long without balance, the entire workshop temperature swung wildly between desert heat and polar storm. And they grew, fast. Within days, Blaze could accidentally scorch steel beams with a frustrated sneeze. Frost's breath crystallized entire tool racks if she got startled. Keeping them hidden became a full-time job layered on top of actual repairs that paid my bills. But the hardest part wasn't the feeding. It was the attachment. They followed me everywhere. If I walked to the front office, 2 sets of claws padded behind me. If I climbed under a hauler to fix a drive shaft, 2 curious dragon snouts wedged in beside me. When I slept on the cot in the back room, they curled on either side, heat and cold perfectly balanced, like living climate control systems. They trusted me completely. That terrified me more than security inspections ever could. Because trust meant responsibility. And responsibility meant consequences. The Colony Council announced martial readiness on the 8th day. Word had spread beyond Blackridge. Orbital surveillance had picked up the twin adult dragons circling high-altitude routes more frequently. Trade lanes reported sightings. Military analysts labeled them a paired sovereign-class threat. Translation: someone important wanted them neutralized. Heavy artillery shipments arrived at the colony perimeter by nightfall. I was tightening a coolant valve when the sky split open with a thunderclap roar. Blaze's head snapped upward instantly. Frost's wings flared wide. Through the workshop window, I saw streaks of anti-air missiles cutting across the clouds. No, I breathed. A massive explosion lit the upper atmosphere. Fire and ice collided high above, turning the sky into a storm of steam and burning light. The adult dragons had returned, and the colony had chosen to attack. Blaze let out a high-pitched shriek. Furious, protective, terrified. Frost pressed against my leg, trembling. Instinct radiated from them both. Fight. I dropped my wrench and knelt in front of them. Listen to me, I said firmly, gripping Blaze's snout with one hand and Frost's with the other. You are not ready. Another explosion thundered overhead. The entire workshop rattled. Blaze tried to pull free. You go out there, I snapped, and they will shoot you down. He froze at the tone. Frost's pale eyes met mine, searching. The bond pulsed, stronger than before. Not just emotion now. Thought fragments. Parents. Pain. Danger. I swallowed hard. You want to protect them? I asked quietly. Both hatchlings stilled. Then stay alive. Outside, a colossal shape burst through the clouds. Obsidian scales torn and bleeding from fresh impacts. The silver-blue dragon followed close behind, wings trailing frost that extinguished incoming missiles mid-flight. They were fighting to escape, not attack. The colony defense cannons began charging for a full volley. If they fired all batteries at once, they might actually kill them. Decision crystallized in my mind before fear could argue. I ran. Blaze and Frost bolted after me as I sprinted from the workshop toward the Quarry Ridge communications tower. Security forces were too focused on the sky to notice a grease-stained mechanic barreling through restricted terrain with 2 juvenile dragons at his heels. I climbed the tower ladder 2 rungs at a time, lungs burning. The main artillery uplink console was unmanned, automated targeting engaged. Perfect. I slammed open the access panel and ripped free the primary targeting cable. Warning sirens blared instantly. Manual override required. The system barked. Yeah, I muttered, pulling my multi-tool from my belt. Below, Blaze and Frost circled the tower base anxiously. The artillery cannons rotated upward, recalibrating. I jammed my tool into the processor housing and forced a feedback loop through the targeting array. Sparks exploded outward. The cannons froze mid-rotation. Across the sky, the adult dragons seized the moment. The silver-blue dragon exhaled a sweeping arc of frost that blanketed the upper missile grid. The obsidian dragon dove hard, banking toward open horizon. Security alarms howled. Sabotage detected, someone shouted over loudspeakers. Of course it was sabotage. I just crippled the colony's primary defense grid. Bootsteps pounded toward the tower. I climbed down slowly, hands raised before they even aimed rifles at me. What have you done? The security commander roared. Stopped you from starting a war, I replied evenly. Above us, the twin colossal dragons hovered. Not attacking, not fleeing yet. Watching. Then something unexpected happened. Blaze stepped forward from behind my legs. Every soldier froze. The tiny ember dragon, still barely larger than a large dog, lifted his head and released a sharp, defiant cry. Frost moved beside him, wings flaring wide as Frost spiraled outward in protective arcs. The adult dragons responded instantly. They descended. The ground trembled as both colossal forms landed behind the hatchlings, towering over the colony forces. Weapons shook in human hands. The obsidian dragon lowered his massive head, not toward the soldiers, toward me, his golden eye locked with mine. No rage, no threat, a question. I stepped forward slowly, placing myself between armed troops and 4 dragons capable of annihilation. They don't want this fight, I said loudly. You attacked first. The silver-blue dragon unfurled one injured wing slightly, revealing the industrial braces I had installed days earlier. Proof. The commander's jaw tightened. They are classified apex threats. Their parents. I shot back. And those are children. Silence stretched heavy across the quarry. Then, slowly, the obsidian dragon folded his wings. The silver blue followed. The hatchlings pressed closer to their parents but didn't retreat. The message was clear. We could end this here, or burn everything. The commander lowered his weapon first. One by one, the soldiers followed. Tension drained from the air like a storm finally breaking. The adult dragons turned their massive bodies toward the open horizon. Blaze hesitated. Frost looked at me. The bond pulsed again, stronger than ever. Not goodbye. Invitation. My chest tightened. I can't fly, I muttered softly. The silver-blue dragon lowered one wing carefully, creating a platform of frost-hardened membrane. The obsidian dragon mirrored the motion on the other side. Blaze nudged my leg impatiently. Frost chirped softly. The colony watched in stunned silence as I made the most reckless decision of my life for the second time in 2 weeks. I stepped onto the wing. Heat and cold balanced around me as Blaze and Frost climbed beside me. With a single, thunderous beat, for dragons lifted into the sky. Blackridge shrank beneath us. The colony that had nearly become a battlefield faded into distance. Ahead stretched open wilderness, mountains untouched by artillery grids, skies free of targeting locks. I didn't know where we were going, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I hadn't just saved 2 colossal dragons. I had chosen them, and they had chosen me. The bond that followed would change everything.